Welcome back, Sorare NBAers. Today we're looking at MVPs, very important players in every lineup, the best players in the league. We're going to break down some stats from last year, and we're going to go over the different scarcities and which ones I think are most worth playing and where you get your most value for your dollar. And so what I've done here for last year's data, this is a lot of good data to look at when you're deciding on purchases. You can see the average Sorare points per game here. Generally, I think points per minute is a better indicator than points per game. That takes into account when somebody might leave with an injury. They don't get punished for that. One of the things we look at is standard deviation. So how far above or below their average they're hitting. Some guys have high standard deviations, meaning they're all over the place. Other guys a little bit lower. They're more consistent. I like to calculate average range for each player. So like for Jokic, his average range is somewhere between 49.4 and 79.2. And then we can tell how many times he had an outcome below the low end of his range, so below the 49.4 or above the high end of 79.2. I have a max points in a single game here and their minimum for the season. And if you want to check out any of this information, it is all available on the preseason analysis tab on the NBA tracker. When we're evaluating who can put up the biggest numbers, a lot of times it's who can score the most points per minute. So these numbers are from the trade deadline last year through the end of the regular season. This is the best representation of what the team looked like post-trade deadline. And of course, as we get into the new season, we'll use the new season's data. We'll get a more accurate representation of how things are shaking out with all the new team structures. That the difference between the limited, the rare, and the super rare is obviously big steps up. From rare to super rare, you get a huge jump. With no streaks in super rare, the prize pools being pretty standard across the board, yeah, you have to beat less people, but it takes such a huge investment to make a good super rare lineup. I don't know that it's even really worth playing. I would say if you're jumping in from scratch, the rare would be the level to jump into if you had a big bankroll. And of course, the limited has become very affordable if you have a smaller bankroll. But some of these guys, so these are all classic cards, obviously, because we don't have the new season out yet. So I'm going to take off the super rare for now. We're just going to focus on limited and rare for each of these players. Going up to Curry, he's had some injuries, and he's getting a little older. Can he still do it? He's going to be asked to do a lot this year again. 37. This is why his price is low. He's already picked up a little hamstring injury in training camps. Superstar player. He had one game over 100 last year, so it's obviously still in there. It's just not every night. If we highlight him, average range about 28 to 57, and he's just as likely to go above as he is below. Last year, his low game was a 9, and his high game was 103. And I think that's the highest game of anyone in the league last year. I don't think anybody else broke 100. So an interesting play. And a cheap one. Anthony Davis becomes really interesting to me. So a lot of these games that are on this game log were with the Lakers, where he was 1B, 1A, 1B with LeBron. Traded to the Mavericks with Kyrie out. He became focal point number one, had a couple huge games, and then got hurt again. That's always the risk with Davis, is the injury history. $15 for a limited and about 82 for a rare. I think to start the season, this is a guy that could put up some huge games early on. He's only a 44 right now, so he'd be playable alongside another superstar if you had an in-season superstar to play with him. I wouldn't write him off. I know the injuries are there, and it's a big risk, but he should be healthy to start the season, and hopefully he can get back to dominating. Of course, a defensive player of his caliber, with also the offensive game he possesses, he becomes someone who can put up big numbers. Last year, he went minimum of 5, maximum of 74. Huge standard deviation, but much more likely to be below than above, and that's because he leaves games with injuries from time to time, and he'll put up some low numbers. But his average range between 35 and 67 puts him in the same category as all the rest of these potential MVPs. Zion Williamson is a really interesting case here. So 146, this guy's always put up high points per minute. We don't really know what New Orleans is going to look like. Completely reworked team. So you can see from the picture here, he showed up at Media Day in a lot better shape than he's ever been in his NBA career. Could be a huge year for him. Now, he's got some stuff over his head. He's getting porn stars pregnant and whatever else he was into in the offseason. He's got to deal with all this off-the-court stuff. I thought he might be suspended for some sort of off-the-court incident, but physically, he looks a lot better. Maybe he's making a change in his life. Right now, it says he has a back injury, but he's feeling good. So if he can stay on the floor He's still 25. He's been a really good player when he's on the floor. Max points of 59.5 last year, minimum of 19.9. Pretty even dispersal, high and low outliers. I like it. I like it as a flyer. You can certainly get him cheap now. $6 for a limited and 33 for a rare. Probably worth a flyer. If he turns into a superstar and you get him at these prices, you're going to be really happy with yourself. Luka, obviously a much more popular player. Went to a good situation in LA. And for the first time in LeBron James's career, he kind of took a backseat to another player. Luka seems like the 1A in Los Angeles right now. Looks like he's in his best shape of his life. Had a good off-season training. Dominated Eurobasket. We're looking at a big year loading for Luka. And he can certainly put up points. Big standard deviation, but a lot of his are above the high-end range, much more so than below, so 6% is a really good number in this category. His minimum last year was 23, max of 94.7, so obviously capable of putting up huge games. He seems to have carte blanche to shoot it when he wants in LA, so he's going to score for you, and he's going to score well. Would not be afraid to ever throw Luka in as an MVP. A little more expensive, $61 and almost $300 for the rare. Brings us to last year's MVP, SGA. Another guy that is very consistent. Lowest game of the year was 29.4, and he did put up an 85. Much more likely to hit a high-end outlier than a low one. Anybody with a normal range that starts above 40 is probably an MVP, and this guy's just consistent. And he's very good. Gets to the foul line a lot, score you a lot of points, and his cards are always cheaper than the other top players. So for $36, you get yourself a limited, and for less than $200, you can grab a rare. That brings us to Wemby, another guy that his high ends are way more common than his low ends. Minimum of 19.6, max of 83.6, and another guy with a low end of his normal range at 40. So these are great plays. Wemby's always expensive, and of course he's coming off the deep vein thrombosis. Will he be back to full health? Everything I've read, it sounds like he's ready to go for the season. Frame is a little worrisome. Is he going to get hurt again? Is he going to get a leg injury? Scares me about Wembanyama. Athletic, big, but really skinny. 108 for the limited, $500 for a rare. But obviously a guy who's still 21, growing into his body, superstar already. Everything you'd want in a long-term card. And that brings us to Giannis. Now, Giannis doesn't have the supporting cast around him that he's had the last couple of seasons. Chris Middleton traded away. Dame Lillard back in Portland. Drew Holiday's gone. The Bucks are going to be piecing it together a little bit this year, it looks like. This is a guy that can really score you points, and he's still fairly affordable. 41 for the limited. A little over 200 for the rare. Put up a 97.3 last year. Slightly more likely to have an above high-end outlier than a below. And I think you're in a situation with the Bucks where he's just going to have to take over games. So I think you can expect Giannis to have a big year, possibly the biggest statistical year of his career. And that brings us to Jokic. And this is the best player on the planet. He's been the best player on the planet for the last 5 years or so. So the low end of his average range is almost 50. So you can see how much higher that is than every other player. The high end of his range, almost 10 points higher. He's more likely to have a really great game than a lousy game. Got up as high as 97.9 last year, but many games in the 80s. This is a guy that is your anchor MVP above all else. And for the price, would you rather have Wemby or Jokic? Personally, I'm Jokic. I know he's older, but he's less athletic. He's not jumping as high. He's less likely to pick up an ankle injury or a knee injury as he stays on the floor for most of his game. And he's effective doing that. 80 for a limited, 440 for a rare. So these are your anchors. And how many do you want to pick up? You can make 5 champ lineups. You can make 5 contenders. Do you want 5 MVPs of the same card? Like, would you want 5 Jokic, or would you want to spread it around? Personally, I like to diversify a little bit. Injuries happen. Let's say you put all your eggs in the Wemby basket and he has a recurrence of his thrombosis, or he picks up an injury and he misses part of the year. Then you either have to spend up on more players or you're just forfeiting your season, basically. So I like to diversify. You never know what's going to happen. We didn't expect Tatum to tear his ACL and miss the whole season. I would think you'd want to diversify, and some of these guys are pretty affordable, especially if you're playing the limited version. And the other factor that we haven't factored in is how much are things going to cost when the new season starts? What are these auctions going to go for? I think the initial ones will probably be pretty high, and then it'll settle down. That's kind of what's happened the last couple seasons. So it depends on how aggressive you want to be. And of course, what you're considering is, if I spend the money up front, I'll have less competition in the first couple game weeks. If you can win something immediately, it might pay for your whole season. But if you don't, and you're left holding cards that you paid 50, 60% more than they're worth in a month, you have to wrestle with that the rest of the year. So what's your budget? How do you want to attack it? Watch for another video coming soon to go over a handful of guys that I think are in line for big seasons that are a little less known or a little cheaper. Well, thanks for watching. I'm getting out of here. Take care.